Hey everyone, welcome to the K9 Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the K9 Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. Hey everyone, welcome to the K9 Culture Podcast. This is your host, Brittany, and today we are joined by Chris. He is the handler of K9 Tambo. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brittany. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So K9 Tambo, he's the star of the show. He's the main reason we're here. We just don't speak dog, and so you have to speak on his behalf, and I trust that you know exactly what he wants to say. So
absolutely.
Before we talk about him, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I've been in law enforcement now for going on 23 years. Quickly as I got into my law enforcement career, I realized that, my passion was within the K9 unit. I was lucky enough to get on our team within the first couple of years, which is kind of hard to do. And, I got my first dog, and, I knew that was my passion. So 17 of those years I've spent in our K9 unit. I've been able to retire 3 dogs. Tambo's been my last one. The other 2 have unfortunately since passed away. 7 of those years I spent as our unit commander. So I had the privilege of leading a rather large, busy unit here on the East Coast within the federal side for 7 years. So that was a blast. And then, recently I moved up to some leadership positions within my department. And I tell people all the time, I sorely miss, being with the dogs and that was my passion. So it's been kind of a tough adjustment for me, to say the least.
Right. How did you and K9 Tambo get together? How did that placement look? Like, did you choose him or was he chosen for you? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, and that's actually a great story, Brittany. And so I had retired 2 dogs, and I took an assignment out in Hawaii, and I came back, and I didn't think coming back to K9 was going to be in the cards. I had taken some other leadership positions, and then our unit commander position opened up, and I was selected for it. And we have a rather large, about 40-man team. And my boss at the time was a friend of mine. And when I came back, she said, look, you're coming back as the commander, but you're not going to have time to work a dog. And I said, look, I really want to work a dog. I like leading from the front. And, I'd say for the first 6 months, I didn't have a dog, and I kept bugging her. And ironically, there was a dog in the kennel named Tambo. And Tambo had been with 2 other handlers, and didn't work out for one reason or another. And, my boss said to me, fine, you want a dog, you got to take Tambo. And Tambo was kind of viewed as the problem dog, and the dog that was kind of aloof, the dog that wouldn't bond with anybody. So me being me, at first I was like, I don't know. But then, I'm always up for the challenge. And so I ended up taking Tambo, and that's kind of how our journey got started together.
That's awesome. It's like fate, like it was just set up for you. It was perfect.
And I tell you, it was interesting because he was aloof, when I first got him. And, I know there's different theories with working dogs when you take them home. But, my theory is that, when they come home, they're part of the family. I let them be a dog. When it's time to work, it's time to work. So, I let him bond with me over time, and, he would always sleep near me on the floor, and I would always kind of get down at his level and just sit there. And then one night, he came over and he put his head in my lap, and I knew right there that I had his trust, and I had that bond. And then from there, Brittany, we were rocking and rolling. I mean, we were inseparable. He was an amazing detection dog, and had an amazing 7-year career.
Yeah. So he was a detection dog. So tell us a little bit about his role and what he did.
Yeah. So Tambo was an explosive detection canine. So when we would go out and select our dogs, we were using a kennel named Von Lick Kennels out in Indiana. So our team of trainers would go out there and we'd assess the dogs based on our mission requirements, and we always try to find we call them strong social police dogs that can work in any environment, because when you're looking for explosives or you're going out on bomb threats and stuff like that, you want a dog that is not going to be rattled by any type of environment. So we try to get dogs that were environmentally friendly, that had a good hunt and had a good drive. So those are the type of dogs that we look for, and we also with where I do work, we search a lot of sheer volume of vehicles, and sometimes it can be up to 2,000 vehicles a day, which is unprecedented within the canine community. So we got to have those tireless workers that can then work them long periods of time, that have that hunt and drive that we need, and Tambo definitely had that.
That's awesome. So he did the detection work for about 7 years.
Yep.
And then what was next? Was it a medical retirement for him?
Yeah, so we were on a call, and we were sweeping a tractor trailer, and usually I lift the dog into the truck whenever we're doing sweeps and stuff, and Tambo got rambunctious and tried to leap up into the back of the tractor trailer, hit his right carpus and tore a ligament, so which severely limited his mobility. So we went to the vet and then the orthopedic, and they said, look, he can recover from this, but it's severely gonna hinder him, his working career going forward. And at the time, Tambo was almost 9 years old, and we kind of retire our dogs at that 10-year mark. So we made the decision to medically retire Tambo, because we always have the dog in mind, and we want to make sure that they have a good career in retirement. So we made that decision to retire him, and he kind of became part of the family from there. And it was good timing, because my son was born. My first son was born shortly after that, and so Tambo went from working to protecting my son, and
Yeah.
and being his shadow. So Tambo's a very regimented dog, and he likes to have a job. So we kind of took on that role for a while until he ended up injuring himself again. So
Yeah. We'll talk about the second injury, but I want to back up to medical retirement. So if a service canine retires, do they have any medical benefits, retirement benefits? Like, what does that look like for a handler once your dog retires?
yeah, so what a lot of people don't know is, when these dogs work, they're fully funded, through that agency. All their medical needs are taken care of. But when that dog retires, you sign a waiver. That dog becomes, your dog, but then at that point, the burden of cost falls on that handler.
Hmm.
And I kind of relate, the working dogs to professional athletes, is that they're these prime athletes, and they work through their career, a lot of high stress assignments, and a lot of workability, and then when they retire, kind of like NFL players, the body starts to break down over time, and that's when these dogs really need that care.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, to no fault of any of the agencies, because it's not their fault. There's nothing set up for these dogs in retirement,
Right.
and that's where the cost really starts to put a strain on a lot of the handlers.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen different like GoFundMe's. We're
Hmm.
going to talk about Project K9 Hero, but different nonprofits that kind of step in and help these retired service dogs. But we'll get back to Tambo for a sec. So he had another injury after his retirement. So tell us about that injury.
Yeah, so we did rehab. We decided not to do the surgery for the ligament tear, so we did rehab, and he was doing really well. Like I said, spending every day with my son, and I have a pretty big yard, and one thing with Tambo is he's pretty prey driven. So there was it was either a rabbit or a squirrel that was in the yard. He saw it. He leaped off the top step, and I knew something was wrong right after that, because he instantly kind of his legs buckled, and he came back limping severely. So got him back into my orthopedic, and then they told me that he not only tore one ACL, but he tore both. And
Mm-hmm.
what I didn't realize at the time with dogs is that when one ACL tears, that it's prone to have the other one tear.
Yeah.
So that severely limited his mobility, and with these working dogs is tough because their mind continues to stay sharp, but the body
Right.
starts to break down, and that's when Project K9 Hero first came into the picture.
Yeah, so tell us about that. So, with the torn ACL, you guys ended up doing the TPLO surgery, which is a pretty, I don't know how dogs are walking same day. The surgery seems crazy to me. I know that vets do it all the time, though, and like shout out to those vets, but it's also a very expensive surgery that usually also requires some prehab, some rehab. Um, so, tell us how you got set up with Project Canine Hero, and tell us a little bit about Project Canine Hero. They were on the podcast like 2 years ago. But for anyone that didn't hear that episode, talk a little bit about like what they do because they do really good work.
Yeah, they're amazing. So Project K9 Hero is a national nonprofit that takes care of the medical needs of retired military and police working dogs that have significant health issues. So Jason Johnson is the founder of the organization, and what I've said in other interviews, and Jason will tell you this, he started that organization with $500 in his pocket, and he's now built that up where he's brought in over, I think, 350 dogs into the program. So I had met Jason 2 years prior at a Canine Hits conference in DC, and Jason and I became friends. And Jason actually helped another dog on our unit that had a 3-year-old dog that had leukemia
Mm,
and had to retire early. And Jason provided care for that dog in retirement and was able to provide another year and a half of time with the handler and the dog and his family, which was amazing. So when I called Jay up after he had tore both of his ACLs, Jason got him right into the program, and we went over to see Dr. Dykes, who's one of the best orthopedics in the area. They kind of did an assessment, and he said, "Look, we're going to do this first TPLO surgery, and if it's stable, we may not have to do the second one." And I really appreciated that
yeah.
because I know there's some places that will say, "Hey, we're going to do one, and we're gonna do the other," and why put the dog through surgery if it doesn't need both of them? So we did the first one. That was about $7,000, which Project K9 Hero fully funded, and then we went through the whole gamut of rehab, hydrotherapy,
Hmm.
rehab exercises. So, and Project K9 Hero, fully funded that. And I tell you, Tambo was very stoic and a warrior through that whole process. He recovered, very quickly. And I remember, about 6 months after that, seeing him run in the yard, and I remember calling Jay up, and I said, "Man," I said, "you brought my boy back to life." I said, because seeing him suffer like that and barely be able to get around was
Hmm.
was was really tough, and that's what Project Canine Hero was able to do for Tambo the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that resource. It's such a needed resource because like you said, once those dogs retire, that's it. There's no more
Yeah,
funding, there's no more anything. So it's such necessary work. And I know now you guys are battling another medical issue that I've been following on social media. And tell us a little bit about that and kind of how that started to unfold.
yeah. So we got Tambo back to health, and I'm a person that likes to give back, and so I wanted to get back to Project Canine Heroes. So Jay and I became good friends, and Tambo became kind of one of the ambassadors for Project Canine Heroes. So we got to do a lot of events together. We did the Clemson Tigers, we did the Seattle Mariners, we did the Baltimore Orioles, and then on Tambo's 11th birthday, which I got to take my son to. The Philadelphia Phillies honored us for their salute to service. So I got to take Tambo on the field, and they got to wish him happy birthday with a sellout crowd on his 11th birthday, which was
That's
amazing.
awesome.
So,
Yeah.
and my son got to be there, and he was only 2.5, and that was a great memory for me to have with him. So, we were rocking and rolling after that, Brittany, doing a lot of ambassador stuff, and then in July, it was a typical morning. Again, talking about Tambo being very regimented, I got up that morning and, I get up at 4 a.m. I go down and, I feed Tambo his breakfast, and he's always enthusiastic to eat. And it's the same routine that we had when we were working. I fed him his breakfast. I spent a little time with him, and I left for work that day. And don't ask me why, but that day I left work early, and
Hmm.
I wasn't feeling it, and I had some leave time to take, so I ended up leaving early for one reason or another. And I came home, and Tambo usually greets me at the door, and that day he didn't. And I said, well, that's weird. And I found him in the dining room. He was sprawled out. He was conscious,
Hmm.
but I saw that he had thrown up a couple of times, and I knew something was wrong. So that the first thing I did was, I checked his gums. His gums were very pale.
Mm.
I got him up on his feet, and he was very, very wobbly. And as handlers, we these are easy telltale signs. So I knew something was wrong, and I knew I had to get him into the emergency vet. So I loaded him in the car. I got him over to the emergency vet, and they took him back right away. And I didn't know what was wrong, and they
Right.
came out and they told me, look, Chris, he had a mass rupture on his spleen, and
Mm.
the we're gonna have to do emergency surgery to save his life, because when these masses rupture on the spleen, the abdomen starts filling with blood, and
Right.
time is of the essence. And um, for if I had come home probably an hour or two later, he probably wouldn't have made it,
Hmm.
which is the crazy part. But at that point, fast forwarding back, they came back and said, "Look, here's the quote. It's going to be seven to $9,000 for the emergency surgery and everything." And I remember vividly calling Jay up with Project K9 here, and I said, "Hey, bro, like this is what's going on." And he said, "Chris," it was a very short conversation, Brittany, because he said,
Hmm.
"Chris, we got your and Tambo's back 100%. Tell them to do whatever they need." So
I love
I
that.
said, "Look," I said, "Yeah," and that was it. That was the gist of that conversation. And to have that security and not even worry about finances at the time
Yeah.
was huge for me. So I told them, I said, I want to move forward with the surgery. And they said, great, we'll get him prepped. And they said, look, be aware that he may not make it through this surgery. So hearing that was very tough, and I had a lot of stuff going through my head, prior to that. And I talked about it in another interview, because they asked me about a bonding moment with Tambo, and I'm going to talk about this moment here.
Hmm.
Is they were getting ready to take him back for the surgery because they had to remove the spleen, and they said, look, Tambo's pretty panicked. And I said, that's not like him, because Tambo's always been very, very stoic. So I remember vividly walking to the back, and they said, look, why don't you come back and see him before we take him back? And I walked back, and I didn't even say anything, and he knew I was in the room. His head swiveled back, and we kind of locked eyes. And for the first time in my career, I saw panic in his eyes,
Mm.
and that really hit me hard. And I was very emotional at that point. But the one thing that I thought about, for with these dogs for 7 years, that dog, it has been that silent present, that security blanket for me. Because like
Right.
when us as handlers, when we go through trials and tribulations in life, whether it's divorces or the loss of a loved one, that constant presence of that dog is that security blanket.
Yeah.
So I knew in that moment that it was my time to give back to him. It
Hmm.
was my time to be there for him. So I said, hey buddy, dad's here, I'm right here. And instantly, Brittany, that calm came over his face, and I remember that vividly. And I felt a sense of peace in that moment. And they said, excuse me, they said, okay, we're gonna take him back. His blood pressure's starting to tank a little bit, and they said, we'll call you in an hour. And I remember just going for a drive, and I was an emotional mess, and that hour seemed like 2 hours. But they called and they said, look, his we got him opened up, and his liver is completely covered in masses,
Wow.
and we're 99% sure this is cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and also from what we can feel, we feel like it's on the liver as well. So I was an emotional mess at that point, and then they asked me a question. They were like, so what do you want to do? And I remember sitting there, and I was like, what do you mean, what do I want to do? They're like, do you want to move forward with the surgery? And without hesitation, I said yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Knowing Tambo, and knowing what he's been through in his working career and the resilience with all his injuries, I said 100%, let's do it. And
Yeah.
so they did the surgery,
And they removed
and
the spleen.
they removed the spleen, and they said the next 2 days are going to be a really rough recovery. And again, he may not. Some dogs don't make it through the recovery, but
Yeah.
Tambo, being the warrior, within 2 days he was walking around, he was eating, and we were doing good. So the next point after that was now waiting for the biopsy results to
Mm-hmm.
to come back.
Yeah.
So
And then
um,
when once you got those back, you found out the type of cancer that he had, right?
yeah, yeah, which I wasn't very familiar with at the time, but so they called me within about 5 days, and they said, "Look, he has hemangiosarcoma." And not being too familiar with that, the first thing I did was, try to do as much homework on that as possible. And
Yeah.
I was reading on that. They call it the silent killer in dogs because when these blood masses form on the spleen, and they rupture, a lot of, and the interesting thing, Brittany, after that, I was talking to a lot of people, and they said, my dog had the same thing, but I didn't get home in time. This mass ruptured, and it was too late. So I was
Hmm.
grateful that I was able to get him there.
Right.
So I knew the type of cancer that I was dealing with, and they said, and I remember vividly asking them. I said, did you biopsy the spleen and the liver? And they said, no, just the spleen. But from what we felt like there was masses on the liver as well. So the
Yeah.
next step from there was getting an appointment with an oncologist. So I kind of did my research, and Blue Pearl in Malvern, PA, had a good oncology, department. So I got an appointment with them, and I remember sitting down with the oncologist the first day, and she's like, "Look, Chris, like, um, because I said, is he a candidate for chemotherapy?" And they said, "Look, if here's the problem: if the cancer has spread to the liver as they suspect, chemotherapy is not going to do a whole lot, and you may be looking at anywhere from 2 weeks to a month."
Wow.
And I remember, and they said the problem with that, if it is on the liver, these blood masses can rupture again at any time, and then you're looking at another emergency situation. So if I were to go to work and that would happen again, and
Yeah.
nobody's there. So I had all these thoughts going in my head. So they took him back for the ultrasound, and again, 30 minutes felt like 2 hours.
Hmm.
And I remember her coming back in, and she said, I can't believe this, but what they thought were masses on the liver weren't, and the cancer is not yet spread to the liver.
Oh, that's great.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so they said he's a candidate for chemotherapy. And I remember, again, I called Jason up, and he said, bro, you already know, we got you. And again, we started chemotherapy that day, which was amazing.
How many chemo treatments have you done to date?
Yes, so we started a plan. So we did 5 intravenous chemo sessions, and we did one every 2 weeks. And so I would take off work a day every other week and drive him up from Baltimore to Pennsylvania. And so we did those, and I got to tell you, those rides, because it was about an hour and a half from my house, were very therapeutic for me, because it was almost like that I had that time again in the car with him, all those long rides in the car, and it was like, we were in this together, and we were heading, we were battling this together, and I felt like I was there for him, and I tried throughout this, I was, kind of started to document everything on Instagram. And so I tried to make, for people watching, not all gloom and doom. So
Yeah.
we would do different themes each week for chemotherapy. So I know one of them, my nephew was a big WWE fan. So I did a whole John Cena theme with the Never Give Up. So I put the Never Give Up shirt on Tambo, and I had a John Cena shirt on, and I had the Never Give Up towel. I had him come out to the John Cena music, and people really liked that. And then when he finished his last in-person chemo session, I did a whole Rocky theme where I got him a costume, and he had the boxing gloves on, and he came out to There's No Easy Way Out, from one of the Rocky movies,
Yeah.
and people loved it. And then from there we started, in which what we're doing now, we've gone to an oral chemo pill, which we've been on for about 3 weeks now, and
Okay.
he's taking that every day. And I just had my 5 week follow up with the oncologist this past Monday, which I was very nervous about, because they were going to they were doing another ultrasound of the liver. So I was worried that, I didn't know if the cancer had spread anywhere. So I actually had his Tambo Strong shirt. Tambo was wearing this shirt. I put on him that day for good luck. And I'm glad to report that, there was no signs of any cancer anywhere.
Wow.
Everything was completely clear. And so as of now, we don't have to go back for another checkup for another 6 to 8 weeks. And he's been tolerating the oral chemo pill pretty well. He did have some nausea and days he didn't want to eat when he was doing the intravenous. That was usually on day 4 or 5 when he was going through that.
Yeah, I was going to ask if he had any symptoms with chemo when our dog went through chemo. We did 3 or 4 different types of chemo. Some were through an IV, some were through a pill. And luckily, we really didn't have too many issues other than sometimes she just wouldn't want to eat. And
Yeah.
crazy enough, what worked to get her to eat was acupuncture. So I took her in.
Wow.
I would be like, hey, she's not eating. They would pop in a bunch of spots and then she would come home and eat. And it was crazy. I was like, I don't know what kind of woo-woo science y'all are working, but it's helping. And so I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
doing it. But yeah, other than the nausea and not eating, like any other side effects?
No, which was amazing. So, like I said, usually when we were doing the intravenous, it was usually day 4 or 5. He didn't want to eat, so they had given us the Serenia and the anti nausea medication. So the hard part was getting the pills and medication into him, and then once he got into him within a day or two, his appetite was back. So it was always those, I'd say about 2 or 3 days we would battle the nausea, and then he was right back at it. And I tell you, he was a champ through all the chemo. I mean, we would go out for walks, and
Hmm.
he would play with my son, and he was vibrant and happy, and he really was just so stoic and graceful throughout the whole treatment. And he's continued to do that through the oral chemo, and that's had even less side effects, which has been great. I
Yeah.
think he's only had one day that we were going for our rehab session that he threw up in the car. But other than that, he's been great. But one of the things I've been trying to do, Brittany, is with this diagnosis is tackle it from every angle, right? Like, because I'm a firm believer, because after I left the oncology, the last time, she kind of wanted to give me a timeline,
Mm.
and I kind of had an idea, and she said usually a lot of times it's, with chemo, it's 6 months from diagnosis, but there's always outliers,
Yeah.
right? And I told her, I said no disrespect, I said, but I don't, and I've said this before in other interviews, is I don't believe in expiration dates. That I believe that the mind and the spirit and the mentality is what keeps people going, right?
Yeah.
And so what I've tried to do, since Dr. Dykes, who did Tambo's TPLO surgery, has since opened up his own clinic in Lanham, Maryland, with called Fusion Orthopedics, and they're amazing. So I reached back out to him. Him and I had become friends, and I said, "Hey, I'd really like to really work on Tambo's mobility to keep his mobility strong."
Right.
And he set up a whole rehab plan. So I take, my job's been very graceful with me taking time off. I take off once a week, and I drive him about 2 hours to Lanham, near DC, and he goes through all his exercises, and we usually end with, they do a therapeutic massage, stretches, and then we do the hydrotherapy, and
Hmm.
he ends with that, and that's really helped his mobility. And I've also looked at a lot of holistic approaches, turkey tail mushroom,
Yeah. Turkey tail's so
which
good.
yeah, and I really took a deep dive into that, and I've had a lot of great people reach out to me and tell me about a lot of the holistic approaches. So he gets that. He gets the Dasaquin with his food, the omega-3, and then I'm really taking a hard look at his nutrition right now too, to see how we can how we can tackle it from that angle. So really trying to tackle this from every angle,
Yeah.
and keep him strong in all aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how it has to be. I mean, think about when a person gets cancer, it's not just a single lens on that chemo or that radiation. It really is a totality of everything. So you talked about nutrition when we had a dog going through cancer. Um, oh gosh, I forget the lady that we worked with now because it's been a couple years. She helped us a lot with transitioning to a much lower carbohydrate diet, which low carbs for dogs, can help with seizures, can help with as they age, like a lot of the brain fog or even like kind of like dementia symptoms that they might have. But she had done studies showing that low carbohydrates, especially if you can get a dog into ketosis, if you can have them on a
Hmm.
ketogenic diet, that can help kind of starve the cancer cells, if you will. And so that was something we kind of followed. And I did notice when we changed from like straight up kibble to, I would say it was like 90% like a ground turkey with like a fish oil, a little bit of just some different green vegetables and like green powder. There was a pretty significant change for us. Now, granted, we were so late in our diagnosis that we weren't able to 100% execute or see final results, but it did make a difference. It moved that notch. So if you're looking for nutritional changes, I mean, maybe something like that, like a
Yeah,
lower carbohydrate, a ketogenic diet. And
that's
there's,
great.
yeah, and I feel like they are doing more and more studies on it for people and for dogs because it's so similar. And yeah, that holistic approach, there's so many from mushrooms, adaptogen, CBD, or different cannabinoid
Yeah.
products. So, yeah, that's amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and what I was going to say is one of the things too is just my energy with Tambo, I think, is important as well, because what I would always tell the handlers, and what I learned from working dogs from over 17 years, is all your energy always goes down the end of that leash,
Absolutely.
especially when you're working. I mean, I've told a story a couple times when I first came on our unit, and we would do our yearly certifications, and I was a young guy in my 20s, and I was going through a bad breakup at the time, and I remember going in for our certifications, and I had all this stuff on my mind, and I remember failing those certifications miserably, and my mentor and the K9 commander at the time, told me that same thing, that all your energy goes down the end of that lead. So if your mind is not right, that dog is feeding off your energy, and that's not just with working the dog, that's with pets and
Yeah.
and any type of dog. So I try to have, I have about an hour and a half drive when I come home from work every day. So I try to, I go work out and I clear my mind, and I stay positive for him, because I could get upset and pissed off about his diagnosis, but Tambo doesn't look at it that way. He doesn't
Right.
know that he has cancer, and
Right.
he's just happy to be alive and be with me. And so I've learned a lot from him, and I try to keep that positive energy, which I think also helps.
Yeah, you said it before we came on air, just talking about like how this has taught you so much, seeing how he is living through this diagnosis. And I think it really can teach us so much because we get a diagnosis, whether it's cancer or a chronic illness or something. And so many people are just, woe is me. Why did this happen? This sucks. And it's like, think about it the way a dog does. A dog doesn't even acknowledge that they have it. They just keep living and doing exactly what they would have done without that diagnosis. And I just think there's a huge lesson for all of us to learn in that.
Oh, it's I mean it's a beautiful thing how dogs live their life, and he's enabled me to live more in the present now. Like, when I come home, and I think a lot of us do this, we have a long day at work, and the first thing we get on Instagram or
Yeah.
Facebook or whatever, and we're just scrolling, and then all of a sudden, I look down, and my son's sitting there, and he's like, Daddy, and I've taken that time away from him, or Tambo's looking for my attention, and
Hmm.
we kind of get lost out of the present. Or how many times do you see concerts now with people watching, instead of being in the present and taking everything in, they're filming it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And dogs, as you said, Brittany, they're just happy to be living in that moment. And the neat thing with all this is that, me documenting Tambo's journey on Instagram and peeling the curtain back a little bit. I never set out for it to be this, but a lot of people that are going through cancer, or chemotherapy, or have a family member, they've reached out to me and said, "Hey, like, I'm going through treatment, and I wanted to stop, I wanted to quit, and I see Tambo's resilience, and I see him just happy to be alive." Or I've posted videos of me just giving him a crunchy treat, and that crunchy sound of him,
Yeah.
it's one of the best sounds with dogs. And it's brought a lot of joy to people, and it's given people some hope.
Hmm.
And one of the podcasts I did, um, affiliate with Counterculture, they linked me up with a cop in Wisconsin named Jack, who is going through leukemia. And so we go back and forth. We I the Houndbound Brewing, which is making Tambo shirts. We sent them out a bunch of Tambo swag, and I tag them and stuff, and we kind of feed off each other's energy and stuff like that. And it's been great. Or somebody reaches out and says, "Hey, my dad has stage 4 cancer, and he's fighting," and I showed him the podcast that you did, and I let him listen to it, and he was crying, and it gave him hope. And this past weekend, and this is the first time I'm sharing this with anybody, and I'll share a personal story. My dad was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma,
I'm sorry to hear that.
this past weekend. The first thing he asked me for is can I send him a Tambo shirt? So I think it's a beautiful thing what he's doing, and in a pretty bad and horrific situation and diagnosis, I'm trying to find the light and positivity in it, and bring some hope to not only Tambo and myself, but other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I know that that
Thanks.
sucks and that's tough, but I love that he reached out and was like, I need a shirt. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, you and what you have done with Tambo's journey, you probably already shifted your dad's mindset. He didn't call to be like, "Oh my God, everything's terrible." And maybe he did. However, he was able to find a little glimmer of hope, kind of like, "Well, I'm like Tambo. Let me get one of those shirts and let me be just like him." So I think
Yeah.
you've already done more work than you know you've done. I think you've probably inspired more people than you know. You've given people hope, maybe people who have been nervous to reach out or they're like, oh, it seems silly. But I guarantee you've affected hundreds, if not thousands of people by the work that you and Tambo have done.
Yeah, and it's funny when my dad, he got the diagnosis this past weekend, and I'm talking to him, and I'm trying to ask him about everything, and he's like, "How's Tambo? How's
Yeah.
how's 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 his treatment going?" And he's like, he said, "You're gonna send me a shirt," and I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, I'm gonna send it to you." So it was really, and my dad is not one to show a lot of emotion, and to see that, and to see him like ask about Tambo and
Yeah.
want a shirt was like, wow, like he's really having an impact. And one of the interesting things too is I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Doggist. Um,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah. So his team reached out to me and they said, Elias wants to do a Zoom interview with you and about Tambo's journey, and we think it's pretty amazing. So last week I had a Zoom call with Elias, and we talked for about 30 minutes, and I told him kind of like I'm telling you, I kind of told him Tambo's whole story and his career, his resiliency, his fight, and now how he's impacting other people. And so the plan is that Elias is doing a new YouTube Substack series. So Tambo's story is going to be featured on that in an upcoming episode, which is pretty exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, and then one of the other big things we have coming up, the Philadelphia sports teams have been great to me. I told you the Phillies honored Tambo on his 11th birthday, and we had a conference call with the Philadelphia Eagles a couple weeks back, and they're going to be not only honoring Project K9 Hero, but Tambo on Sunday Night Football on November 16th. So
Cool. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Tambo will get featured down on the field. I've already sent them some pictures to put up on the big screen. So there's going to be 70,000 people there. And I told them as long as his health is good,
Right.
I said, we'll be there. But the funny thing, backtracking, talking to Elias is from Philly.
Mm.
And so I told him, I said, hey, I said, maybe you can come out to the game. So I think he may look into it, which would be crazy
Yeah.
if the Doggist ends up coming out to the game with us. So
Well, this might get me canceled, but I'm a Cowboys fan.
oh, geez.
I know, I know, I know. But hearing this, I'm like, wait, do I have to change all of my thinking? Like, you're going to really change me. You're going to shift my paradigm here. And maybe the Philly teams aren't so bad. Maybe I can cut them a little bit of slack and I can go back to hating like the Colts or the Steelers more. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I can adjust that.
I'd say the Philadelphia sports teams are first class organization, and
Yeah.
they've treated between the Phillies and now the Eagles, they've treated us great. I'm so thankful for them, and also where I live in Baltimore, the Orioles brought me back out in August for Bark at the Park night, and
Oh, cool.
they honored kind of a final salute to Tambo, which was pretty emotional for me because the Orioles are my childhood team, and they in the bottom of the third inning they brought us up in the left field perch, and they did a mock interview. I'll have to send you the video footage. It's on my Instagram, but they did a mock interview with Tambo, and Tambo was giving him kisses and everything, and so it was a really cool moment. And again, my son was there, and I had my son later in life, and one of the cool things is I never thought, with all the dogs I had, that I would ever be able to share my passion of canine with a child. And
Yeah.
I was blessed with having my son later in life, and he loves Tambo. Tambo's his hero, and he's already running around. He's a future canine handler because he's already running around the house yelling Dutch commands and
Yeah.
with a leash. And so I think that Tambo not only hangs on for himself, but he hangs on for me and
Right.
for my son, and he's continuing to. That's why we just made a new brand of shirts through Houndbound. This was the very first one we did, the Tambo Strong shirts. And if you go to houndboundbrewing.com, you can get the original Tambo shirt, but we just did a new one. And this shirt design, I really wanted to encompass, and my thought process was is I want to encompass his working career, his resiliency, and for anybody that has been affected by cancer, that's going through a fight. And so we created this badass design where it's a black and white design, and it's Tambo. He's got his paw on a explosive device. At the top it says "Defy the odds." it's got the Capitol building in the back, and then at the bottom it says Cancer Warrior, and then it's got the Project K9 Hero logo on the sleeve. And you can go on, those shirts will be on sale up until October 31st.
Yeah, I am going to get one for my little brother. I told you earlier he has cancer. He's 29, found out like the week before his 29th birthday he has cancer. But he's like Tambo. He's just like, whatever, like I'm just going to do my treatments. I'm going to keep living. I have stuff to do. Like I'm not done. And so I'm excited to share this with him and, you know, with anyone else. So what's that website again for the t-shirts? Run it back.
It's houndboundbrewing.com.
Okay.
And you can find them. They're all over my Instagram page, and I have links for the shirts on my Instagram as well, which is lowercase k, the number 9 _ Tambo.
That's exactly what I was going to ask next. So
Yeah.
perfect. All right, Chris. Well, thank you so much for sharing the
Thank you.
K9 Tambo story. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I always give one more shout out at the end. I
Yeah.
have to give a shout out to Tito's Vodka.
Mm.
A quick story with that. I was at a conference, a couple years ago in San Antonio. Coworker and I were sitting there. 2 gentlemen came up and said, "Hey, can we sit here?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." The event was sponsored by Tito's. Everybody was coming up and getting pictures with this one gentleman, and they came up and they said, "Do you know this guy?" And I'm like, "No, I have no idea who it is." And they're like, "Well, it's Tito."
Oh.
So long story short, Tito and I talked. We ended up hanging out the whole night, talking about our dogs, and Tito's Vodka is a huge supporter of animals. So Tito gave me his cell phone number, and I never used it. And it was funny, after Tambo's diagnosis, I knew he was a dog lover, and I texted him and I said, "Hey, look, this is what Tambo's going through." And so he didn't call me back right away, but within an hour, his philanthropy team called me and made 2 generous donations to Project K9 Hero in the name of Tito. So I since then I texted him and I thanked him for it. He responded back, but they're just a great a great organization, and they love dogs. So if I do drink any vodka, is definitely Tito's.
Yeah, I'm glad that they reached out and supported you. I would not have even have known that. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chris. We're wishing K9 Tambo the absolute best.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to defy the odds. And for anybody else out there that's going through anything, is continue to have that positive attitude and defy the odds, and anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to the K9 Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the K9 Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at k9culturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.